Now, we were supposed to have the Brexit Party leader, Nigel Farage, on the programme today. We were just talking about him a bit earlier in that interview, but unfortunately he pulled out and couldn't make it. Hopefully he will be on the show in the next few weeks, though. For now, though, we're joined by the SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, who is in Westminster. Thank you very much for being on the programme today, Mr Blackford.
It's a pleasure, Sophie.
Well, we're gearing up for an election, aren't we? What would be a good night for the SNP?
Well, a good night for the SNP is sending a very strong message from Scotland to Westminster that we have to have a say in our future. We're going into this election defending 35 seats in Scotland out of 59, and we want to improve upon that. We're taking the challenge of winning those seats to all our opponents, the Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs. You know, there was a poll last week that showed that the SNP are still by far and away the leading party in Scotland, a gap of 20 points plus against the Conservatives in second place. And it is, I would say, pretty remarkable that given we've been in government since 2007 in Scotland, that we're still leading the way and seem to have the faith and the trust of a large number of Scottish people. We're very grateful about that. But this is a crucial time, and it is about demonstrating that we're not going to allow Boris Johnson to take us out of the European Union against our will. And there's an opportunity for people in Scotland to vote for the SNP, a vote for a confirmation that we want to have that independence referendum, that we need to have that route to securing our own future as an independent country in the European Union.
Well, let's talk about the drive that the SNP have to try and get that second independence referendum. There is, of course, the idea that there could be a hung parliament, there could be deals being negotiated. Jeremy Corbyn has said he wouldn't grant a second independence referendum in the early years of a Labour administration. Is that good enough for you, or does it need to be next year?
Well, I think what everyone has to recognise, whether it's Boris Johnson, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn, is that when the SNP went to the polls in 2016 in Scotland for the Scottish election, we did that on a manifesto commitment that if there was a change in circumstances, then we'd reserve the right to have a referendum. We won that election where the government in Scotland and any Prime Minister should respect democracy. It should be the people of Scotland, it should be the Scottish Parliament that decides when and how we're having a referendum, and will not be stopped by Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn or anyone else. There is a real risk that we face through what the government is seeking to do to take us out of the European Union. We know that we'll be in transition till the end of 2020. We need to make sure that we can protect our economy, that we can protect jobs, that we can protect the supply of medicines and foods from a no-deal Brexit, for example. So we need to have that referendum so we can secure that place in Europe for us. There is legislation which is currently going through the Scottish Parliament, a referendum bill. It completed its first stage this week. Westminster has to recognise it's our right to choose, and nobody but nobody should stand in the way of the Scottish people expressing their desire to have a referendum on independence.
You mentioned no deal in that answer, and of course the SNP has consistently voted to try and stop a no-deal Brexit from happening. So my question to you is, if you do get the second independence referendum that you want and Scotland votes to leave, would you be happy to just stay in the UK indefinitely if the UK Parliament refused to grant you a deal?
At the end of the day, the UK Parliament can't refuse to grant a deal to us, because the simple fact is that we won the election in 2016, we have that manifesto commitment, we won the election to Westminster in 2017.
Well, but it could be that a deal is not agreed, though, in the same way that a deal, well, it has been agreed with the EU, but it's been consistently blocked by the UK Parliament. You could absolutely see that situation happening.
Well, you're talking about, I'm not quite sure what you're saying. You're talking about Westminster refusing to give us a referendum. Are you talking about a deal on Europe?
I'm talking about a deal.
Well, if you're talking about a deal on Europe, at the end of the day, we've done an economic impact assessment published by the Scottish Government just a few weeks ago that shows that on Boris Johnson's deal, that the economy in Scotland would be 6% weaker than what it would be by staying in the European Union. We're never going to vote for anything and support anything that's going to cost jobs of people in Scotland. Why would we do that? It's inconceivable that we would do so. We want to stay in the European Union. We've said repeatedly that we'll do what we can to make sure that all of the UK stays in the European Union. That's in all our best interests. But ultimately, we have got that right to choose our own future in Scotland and choose to become an independent nation in Europe, because it's about what we would then do with that. It's about the desire that we have, the burning desire to grow our economy, to deliver fairness, to take our climate change responsibilities seriously. But of course, whilst we're still in the United Kingdom, we will work with others to stop Brexit, because for us, this campaign, as much as anything else, is about stopping Brexit, something which is going to harm the economy, but also reduce rights for people. If you think about it today, we as EU citizens have the rights to live and work, to get an education in 28 EU member states. That's going to be taken away from us. And I really grieve at what we're doing to our young people that are going to suffer so much if Boris Johnson and his Brexit fanboys in Number 10 get their way.
I know that, of course, you are always keen to talk about Scottish independence. We talk a lot about Brexit in these interviews, but I'm just interested to know on some of your other priorities, what would be red lines if there is a hung parliament, if you're going into some of these negotiations with perhaps the Labour Party in order to get Jeremy Corbyn into Number 10 after the election. In 2015, Nicola Sturgeon said that scrapping Trident would be a red line in any negotiations with the SNP. Would that also apply this time round?
Well, look, we will come up with our wish list of things that we want to see, but I think it's fair to say there are a number of things which are at the top of our list. Austerity is a issue
what
which is
about
a
Trident?
significant. Well,
specifically asking about Trident.
We've been pretty consistent down through the decades that we don't wish to see nuclear weapons in our soil. We want to make sure, of course, that we take our responsibilities for defence seriously, and I think it's important to say that in today of all days when we've got Remembrance Sunday to look forward to. But we don't believe that we should be investing in those weapons of mass destruction. But there are a number of things that we want to see, Sophie. We want to see the end of austerity. And if I look at the Scottish Government's block grant from Westminster, in real terms it's been cut by 5% by the Tories over the course of the last 10 years, really impacting our public services. It's the poorest in society that are paying the price for Tory austerity, and we want to see an end to that. But we also have to quicken our action on climate change. Given that we are looking at an election and we're electing a government in the UK for the next 5 years, we need to make sure that we recognise that there is a climate emergency and we have to speed up.
I just want to bring you back to Trident. Can you see the SNP propping up a government in Westminster who are committed to the renewal of Trident?
Well, we would simply say that these weapons are not fit for purpose. And the simple fact of the matter is I'm not sure that we're taking our responsibilities for conventional defence as seriously as we should be doing. There's a shortage of active warships in the UK for the moment, as an example. And I think to waste up to £200 billion on these weapons of mass destruction that can never be used is a fallacy. What we need to do is to make sure that we take our responsibilities seriously, that we take account of the security challenges that we face here and abroad. That's what we should be doing. These nuclear weapons are not the answer for the needs of defence and security of the United Kingdom.